Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. John Wayne 691. Sarah arose and wandered nearby. It required a while to recover from the emotional strain of reconnecting to her former life. This was the first time she had used her picturing skill to recall these vivid memories for another. She had felt Ryan's stress as she pictured her journey for him, and as he had come to realize that she really was an extraterrestrial. She had also felt his empathy for her and what she had left behind. Depending on his actions from this point forward, they might become friends. She hoped that Ryan would see the picturing session for what it was. Too many Earth dwellers had misinterpreted contacts with extraterrestrial as abductions, as something distasteful. She thought back to her arrival at her adopted planet, just over a year ago. In those days she was known as Lady Rona. Mark Kimmel. She flexed the muscles in her body. Each felt weak, useless. Unobliterally set the restraining mechanism off her couch. She lay back and sniffed the sterile air of the chamber. She could hardly wait for the fragrant bouquet of her new terrestrial life. Would their food be interesting? Would she ever again taste the wondrous flavor of oranges? Would it be at all like her former home? What about flowers? Would there be roms? In a few minutes, she tried the restraint again. This time the mechanism yielded. Standing, she stretched, flicked on overhead lighting, and congratulated herself that their interstellar trip at 92 where she had communicated to the spacecraft's commander. Lee was quite sure he was at the ship's controls, which were located in a separate section of the spaceship. The atmosphere there was slightly different, controlled for his comfort and that of his crew. Near that planet's moon, the commander replied in a similar mind-to-mind format. Without this ability, the myriad languages of the universe would present a considerable obstacle. Please report our position, she communicated. Her message would inform those on her former home planet of her progress. Somehow this frail connection fortified her. If everything worked out, she would soon be on her new world, would begin a second life. She paused and considered the fact that she had rematerialized. Her brain was working. She turned her head and looked around. Everything seemed as I thought before. Yet now she and this ship were light years away from her old home planet. As they left orbit about Fansha, they had dematerialized and transported across trillions of miles. Now again and near her new home, she had been told that interstellar space flight with its dematerialization and rematerialization was not without its risks. Particularly for humanoids of her type, she was almost material. Being successful, her memories of that portion of the trip were like a series of snapshots. She wished she had been able to absorb more of the incredible experience of traversing the trillions of miles from Fansha. She stripped out of the garment she had worn for the trip and picked up her new garb. The clothes had been fashioned on Fansha. They were meant to resemble those worn by Earth dwellers, to last until she could acquire replacements on the planet below. She reached for the handle of her door with some trepidation. When she opened it, her second-in-command, H.T., lay crumpled at her feet. Blood covered the front of his robe. Pained eyes looked up to her. She stooped to feel his pulse. It was weak. She pushed the emergency call on his belt, caressed the side of his face, and went to check on the others. In addition to H.T., one other member of her team had been fatally injured during rematerialization. They were taken to a special room on the ship where they underwent spontaneous decomposition. The crew and surviving members of the team had stood by and wished them a wondrous journey. A third Fantian, now known as Peter Jones, had suffered severe nerve and muscle damage, although his mind remained sharp. Peter's voluntary muscular functions were far from normal. Forced to dematerialize again as they orbited their new home, he had remained that way for months. Now, amid the rocks and trees of Earth's desert, she looked at a companion from Fantia. Their regimen of exercise and massage, begun as soon as they were fully rematerialized at Harmony, had worked wonders. Peter was 80% cured. If she could get him into the hands of an experienced physical therapist, she believed that he would be restored to his former self. In the meantime, they would struggle across this desert and hope a trillion. Mark Kimmel that the imps did not catch them. They had all enjoyed climbing the soft sand of the dunes and rolling down their sides. It did not matter that sand got in her shoes and clothing. It was sheer freedom and delight for the 20 children. Even her teacher had joined in the fun. Then they played a game of conceal and hunt. The teacher volunteered to be the hunter. She told the children to hide in the sand and she would try to find them. As their day ended, the teacher assembled her class for the trip home. Sarah and the others lined up and the teacher counted. 18. 2 were missing. The teacher told the children to stay with their chaperones and went off to find the missing 2 twin boys. They were always in trouble for something. She returned as darkness began to set in. Without the twins, 90 for any interrogation was sure to reveal their origins. They did not possess the distortion skill of an Earth dweller. Then they would be killed or turned over to covert agencies and forced to cooperate in their nefarious work. Peter and she had learned from the experience of other extraterrestrials to fear the consequences of being apprehended. They needed to deliver their message, to make contact with more people like Ryan Drake, or from Audace at the Academy. Cher communicated to Peter without words. Those days seem idyllic. Peter responded with a smile. Since his injury, communicating mind to mind was the easiest way to express himself. From a complete invalid he had begun to function normally, to walk, and to speak English. She was proud of the conversations he had initiated with Ryan Drake. Proud that he was traversing the desert. Our sick girl of 7, she had gone to the desert with her class from school. It was their first overnight excursion, 2 hours away from her home in Urgi. Did any of you see where the boys went? The teacher asked. The teacher went through the group asking when each child had last seen the boys. But no one had hidden near them, nor had they seen where they had run to. When at last she came to Jolly, the youngster said, "I know where I saw them in me head." The teacher studied her for a time. "You are young to possess the skill, but it is possible. Tell me." "They are in our vehicle, over there," Jolly said, and she had been right. Sarah smiled at that old memory. After that incident she had begun the training for remote viewing and pictioning, the youngest to have ever done so. Now as she studied her surroundings, she wished she were back on the safety of Fantia. She looked at Ryan Drake again. Her celestial allies had told her that he would become her protector. She could not envision how that might happen, but she would know when that moment came. She blinked to clear her thoughts. First they needed to complete their trek across the mesa. Sarah closed her eyes and quieted her mental processes. She saw that the IMS search party had found their rendezvous place with the Ilamis near the old mine. They were now spread out searching for the fugitives' tracks. "In's come," Cody said in a quiet voice. Ryan opened his eyes to see the Navajo kneeling beside him. Sarah stood nearby and motioned for quiet. To the west, he heard the drone of a small airplane. Ryan jumped up, rolled up his sleeping bag, and handed it to the Navajo. He grabbed Boomer's rope and they started off through the trees. He'd been to another world. What he had seen and felt at 25 trillion. Mark Kimmel Ben Sotzi had helped to set him up to encounter these extraterrestrial visitors. Why? How much did Ben know? Late afternoon, they descended a steep trail off the top of the mesa and into a narrow gorge. Someone had strung camouflage netting between the vertical sides of the rocks. It had not been in place too many days, as the ground underneath had tufts of erect grass and bushes with healthy leaves. Exhausted, Peter slumped to the ground. Cody cautioned them, "Remain under net." Peter rest, then traveled to Lobo's ranch. The INS search party followed our tracks up the side of the mesa and they found Cody's hunting camp. Sarah said to 96 been as real as I've been there physically. He was positive it had not been a dream. He was in the company of aliens, extraterrestrials. Sarah and Peter had crossed trillions of miles off space to Jethia. Now what? He had read about UFOs and purported abductions and had wondered about the hostility attributed to extraterrestrials. Amid of confusing and contradictory news reports, the sci-fi books, movies and TV, it was impossible to know what was true. Government bureaucrats had admitted to past lies about terrible things that happened during the Cold War. Nerve gas experiments, radiation tests on orphans, mind control investigations. Now he understood that someone had lied about their knowledge of extraterrestrials, created an enemy where none existed. If they had lied about such an important thing, what else were they capable of? Ryan tried to picture himself as part of Peter and Sarah's orchestrated and friendly cosmos. As one person on our single planet out of many, could he be significant? The Fanchons had traveled trillions of miles to get to Earth. Someone regarded this remote planet as important. Ryan. They discovered where we had buried our trash and now they are convinced they are on the right trail. If we are intercepted out here and our origins discovered, no one will question our disappearance into some secret government facility. I also thought you should know, they've issued a $25,000 reward for our captor. Ryan said, "Great. Now we'll have everybody looking for us. We cannot risk interrogation." Peter stammered. "We need to tell many people about the cosmic paradigm, before the authorities discover who we are." Ryan looked at the two extraterrestrials. In a contorted sort of way, it was all rather funny. Here he was, in the middle of the desert with two extraterrestrials. One who stumbled and stuttered, fleeing from federal agents. What a great story for the folks back home. Who would believe? The man in the wheelchair watched the others and waited. They had gathered in Washington, D.C. for a series of critical meetings. Earlier others had been linked with them by a conference call that included people from 6 countries. Tall windows in the conference room faced onto K Street, but revealed only the brick and glass of the building across the street. The windows were a special triple pane that effectively shut out all noise as well as any external listening devices. The other walls of the room were decorated with paintings commissioned by the men who used this room. They depicted various activities: a movie shoot, an aircraft manufacturing plant, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, a military battlefield, a boy on a bicycle delivering newspapers, a modern hospital operating room, and an offshore drilling platform. In one corner of the room, Jonathan Olson spoke into cell phone. The investment banking arm of his multinational firm in a $7 trillion. Mark Kimmel Ernest Steiger eyes came to rest on a young man in his late 30s, John D. Beck. He sat between two men and answered their queries. Although he was young, the older men treated him with respect. The wheelchaired man liked D. Beck. He could say that about few people. Unlike his own inept children, this young man was ruthless as well as smart, comfortable around men of immense influence, willing to carry out their orders without question. Ordinary people were like cattle, willing to be led. 98 Sile Empire was brokering the merger between a major United States bank and one in Japan. 10 years ago he had served as Treasury Secretary. Dark-suited men in their 60s and 70s sat around the long conference table. He had known most of them for 20 years, some longer. He knew them well enough to know that they all considered themselves elitists, a cut above commoners. They were discussing the printed page that had been distributed in anticipation of the afternoon sessions. The title at the top of the page read, Congress. Ernest Steiger glanced at the 8 names on the sheet. Directly across from him was Oliver Vanderbush. The Sundown sailor from Beverly Hills headed America's largest conglomerate producing recorded music, films, and television programs. Seated next to him, Seymour Norton, at 87 the oldest man in the room, was honored by Madison Avenue as its preeminent image maker. Down the table was Warren Affer, from the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was in deep conversation with James R. W. Smith, a key man at Britain's largest newspaper and publishing conglomerate, but not its owner. To practice media management, one did not need to own newspapers, one needed only to control their sources of information, to control what got printed and when, and in some cases to control editorial policy. John D. Beck was far from ordinary. His eldest son, Richard, had brought D. Beck home from Harvard one Thanksgiving. His own family had been unable to fund a trip back to California. After that weekend, he had taken a particular interest in the lad. When D. Beck's parents died in an automobile accident, he provided the young man funds and paved the way to graduate school. When he graduated, Steiger arranged for a series of jobs within his publishing empire. When the top spot in their Washington-based organization became available, Steiger had recommended the young man and introduced him to the others. After a careful screening, they had seconded his suggestion. "Does anyone have questions?" Olson asked when he disconnected from his call. His presence had been requested because of his friendship with the first man on the list. "Anyone have an update on Williams's standing?" Steiger asked the group. His Midwest-accented words were direct, spoken as if wished to waste no time with the affairs of lesser men. "According to our latest poll, he is leading by 19%, Smith volunteered. Although his organization was based in London, it owns several newspapers in the United States." "Shit," Steiger said. "That's worse than the latest numbers I saw from my people." We have seen to it that the polls don't show how well he really is doing. Warinofer smiled. His ingenuous smile had deceived many adversary and friend. Ofer was this group's primary connection to the intelligence community and its labyrinth of affiliates. Steger said, "I trust that none of us are actively supporting his candidacy." He noted that two men further down his side of the table looked away in answer to his implied query. He saw Trillion. Mark Kimmel, it would have been so much easier if the incumbent had a chance of being re-elected. However, he had foolishly insisted on pushing his conservative agenda without compromise. The commoners in his home state saw the senator's programs benefiting his contributors at their expense. Now they had a chance to retaliate, and Steger had no doubt that their angry voices would be heard in a little over 2 weeks. "Good evening, gentlemen," the candidate addressed the group. "This is a most unexpected pleasure." He acknowledged Jonathan Olson with a surprised look. Williams glanced at each face. From the way he nodded to some, it was obvious that he knew a few of them and around Thetable, but not all. It was also obvious that he was uncomfortable that he had not been invited to shake hands with everyone. Williams had taken crucial time. 100 expected that they had seen the election moving away from their candidate and were busy currying favor in Williams's camp. "We could always leak some of the interesting things we've collected." Ofer laughed. The others around the table chuckled and nodded. The man from covert operations was famous within the group for digging up dirt, real or fabricated. When the murmurs died down, Olson said to John D. Beck, "Show Mr. Williams in." The group's lobbyist and its only public spokesman rose and went to the room's tall double doors. John D. Beck ushered the man of regal bearing into the room. He indicated that their guest should take the seat at the head of the table. Steger had studied Leonard Williams's record recent statements. Some of his proposed programs conflicted with their agenda, and he had a history of catering to certain marginal factions in his home state. If one, he would most certainly require a reminder of today's proceedings. Like most politicians, it was hard to judge how he would behave after assuming a new position. Away from his campaign to make this unscheduled visit, until this moment, he had believed he was meeting with D. Beck to straighten out a minor glitch in his campaign funding. Steger enjoyed these biannual meetings. What was this? Oh yes, his 17th. The election of candidates from either political party worked out almost as well for the affiliates. The Republicans catered to the wealthy and turned their heads as big businesses merged and prospered, an important element in their game plan. The Democrats kept the masses happy and tended to consolidate power in Washington, another important factor in the scheme. The important thing was to keep things moving in the right direction. Tying up key candidates like Williams was essential. "Leonard, let me come right to the point," Olson addressed his friend. They knew each other from real estate transactions before Williams's entry into politics. As you are aware, the bulk of the funds this group is committed to are in, shall we say, escrow. The candidate started to say something, but held his comment. He realized that the men at this table and their network of wealthy individuals and political action committees controlled a major portion of his remaining funds, and probably the funds of his opponent. The campaign was entering its final weeks when spending for television spots was at its peak. Without their funds, his candidacy would have little or no media exposure in these final days. The group had withheld its money until this moment of maximum leverage, and Williams knew it. We wish to discuss certain actions you will take if you are elected, Olsen said. He chose his words carefully. From Deebeck's briefing, the group knew the candidate was a man with a memory for details. One thought we'd discuss the conditions of their money. We won over 1 trillion. Mark Kimmel, what do you mean us but their secrets? Tiger saw the candidate's face register apprehension and comprehension. Acute your opponent. The incumbent agreed. Prior to being elected 60 years ago, Olsen motioned and Deebeck placed a 2-page document in front of Williams. This document will memorialize our understanding. You will also note that we will inform you about particular votes we wish cast. After the candidate carefully scrutinized the pages, he raised his eyes to stare at the men around the table. You people think this is some kind of a game. Well, it's not. People's lives. How countries at stake. You want to sell this information? Leak it out. I have the right to vote my conscience. I want to be part of it. When the candidate offered the pages back to Deebeck, Steiger decided that the man simply did not understand who ran 102 had a deal. Williams glanced at Deebeck. To date, the young man had been his only contact with this group. My God, the election is 2 weeks away. You will undoubtedly be appointed to one of the Armed Services Oversight Subcommittees, Olsen said. These committees regularly hold secret hearings. You will make the transcripts from those hearings available to us, to this group. Olsen motioned to the others around the table. This group has received such information since 1950, Olsen said. What he did not say was that this group, as well as the covert community, already had their own people in each federal agency, and the information being requested would probably duplicate what they would already know. What no one voiced was the real reason for today's meeting: compromising a potential political adversary, the country. Soon after he was elected, he would find out how powerless he really was. John Deebeck did not receive the pages. We do not wish to withhold our money, but, he shrugged his shoulders and offered Williams upon. The candidate, still holding the pages, studied the men around the table. They returned his gaze with cold, unswerving eyes. Their faces said nothing, as they awaited the final act of the man already condemned. When Leonard Williams finally accepted the pen offered by Deebeck, the wheelchaired man could not resist a thin smile. As far as we are concerned, this meeting never took place, Olsen addressed his old friend. You never met with any of us. After Williams retreated from the room, a House candidate from New York was invited to the seat at the head of the table. Sarah found Ryan pacing under the camouflage. She said, "The Inn's men are coming this direction." "How's he doing?" Ryan Drake motioned to the dozing Fanchon. Peter lay on his air mattress, head propped on his backpack. He had fallen asleep as soon as they stopped to rest. "Peter, I shall fear then he appears." Sarah rubbed the yellowish lotion on her bare arms. "His condition is due to the rematerialization process we underwent. He is much improved, compared to when we first arrived here." "Tell me about him." "Peter was my mentor at the Principal Academy of Fanshawe. It is one of the most prestigious places for studies on the planet, and Peter was one of its major attractions. He had a staff who researched and helped prepare his lectures." "What did he lecture about? History?" "He knew more about the technological and eco 103 trillion. Mark Kimmel, tell me more about Peter." I did not meet him until much later, after he was already famous. As the story goes, he was an instant sensation at the academy. No one expected a child from a backward area to be brilliant. Peter turned out to be a child prodigy. He mastered various areas of technology before he was 16, but his real love was history. He was determined to find out the why and how behind technology and its development. Once he dug up the evidence, he began to speak out. Peter developed the ability to enthrall an audience. He was really quite a performer, kept people mesmerized for hours about economics and its interplay with technology. Can you imagine 100th history of our planet than anyone? Like your world, our history is shrouded in mystery, particularly as one goes further back. But I thought Celestials were in charge. Surely they know all about your history? Weren't they the one and part of the material experiences allowing mortals to discover for themselves? Just as on your planet, we have astronomers, physicists, chemists, and biotechnologists. We also have an economic system. The difference is that Fansha has moved through the era when economics dominated our planet. Economic system now subservient to fuel bingoful. It is a tool, not an end in itself. Peter had researched how this had all evolved, how we had arrived at a stabilized plateau. You see, it was not always so peaceful on Fansha. In olden times we too had wars. Like me, Peter's long-time mate is dead. He has a son, an archaeologist, who looks like he will follow his father. Peter grew up in the southern hemisphere of our planet in a place called Ether. As he was growing up, his culture was just being elevated to the planet-wide economic norm. He was among the first to attend a technological institution of any kind. Traveling halfway around your planet to listen to an historian? Well, Fanchons did. Peter was a celebrity. How old is Peter? 78 of the years. He looks about 40 or 50. Sarah smiled. If you ask, I am 66. Don't believe it, you look about 36. Thank you. I will take that as a compliment. So how does this rematerialization stuff work? Don't fully understand it. It is not a technology that Fanchons possess. As I said, we came in the spaceship of another planet, the Albions. They have been doing it for millions of years. I came through it fine. 2 of our companions died. Like to know more about it? Ryan, there is something more important than how we got here. Sarah's large grey eyes held him. In case the INS captures us, I want you to know about it. So you will understand why we sacrificed so much to be here. They've been wondering about that. Ryan was nervous as he envisioned their pursuers racing across the mesa toward them. They had not spoken of it, but the IMS search team was surely getting closer. Sarah said, "You need to know about the organization of the cosmos, about the complex hierarchy of celestial beings. The mortals of your world have trouble perceiving this vast organization because it operates at a higher level. However, as elusive as it may seem, it is very real and extraterrestrials are a part of it. Now it's confusing." Sarah said. Extraterrestrials, anyone not born on this planet, may be either mortal or celestial. The mortal extraterrestrials who visit this planet come from civilizations much more advanced than Fanchas or yours. Our 105 trillion. Mark Kimmel. Ryan focused on her stunning grey eyes. They were surrounded by tiny wrinkles in her tawny skin as she concentrated on forming the unfamiliar English words. The functioning of the universe of time and space requires the integral working of an almost infinite number of celestial beings, Sarah said. Without them there would be chaos. The celestial beings on this sphere report to the sovereign of this local group of inhabited planets, who in turn reports to the galactic rulers, and so on to the central nucleus of the cosmos. So the universe isn't democratic number, nor is it republic or a federation. The same celestials control the universe today who have been in charge for billions. 106. Though they are not celestials, they have the ability to dematerialize their spaceships, that makes them invisible to you. This has contributed to the mystery surrounding their scattered appearances. Ryan nodded that he had heard, not that he necessarily understood what she had said. Celestials are found throughout the cosmos. They create and supervise galaxies as well as assist us. Hold on. You telling me some kind of invisible beings go out and create galaxies? Yes. Celestial beings with unique personalities and fantastic powers common therefore of creation and evolution, Sarah replied. There are others who rule this vast creation. After your trip to Fansha, do you still believe that the delicate balance of planets and stars is maintained without periodic adjustments? Without intelligent controls? She saw the question on his face and said, there is a gravity controller, a celestial being, who manages the gravity forces of the Sun and its surrounding planets, including Earth's. A core of celestial beings has been on Earth since its beginning. Have years. In many cases they were created for this sole function. No mere mortal would ever be allowed to administer something so precious. Okay. So the universe is organized by celestials, Ryan said. Think I can do with it, and I accept that I and Peter are good guys, good mortals. But there must be some bad ones. Everything I've read and heard about aliens, your people are extrapolating from their own violent history. The universe is organized under a system of lawfully administered celestial control, Sarah said. Other planets function in harmony with this celestial scheme. The people I saw on Fansha, everyone on Fansha knows about the administration of the universe by celestials. The celestial you saw on Fansha is the ruler of my former world. The peace and tranquility of that planet is due to his wise guidance. The darkness and confusion of Earth is the exception. Maybe this will help you understand the celestial organization. Consider the number and type of organizations you have in this country: government, commercial, educational, social. She waited until Ryan nodded, acknowledging her statement. Think of the millions of people involved in these tasks in your country alone. Now expand that to the organizations involved worldwide. Then multiply that by a cosmos filled with inhabited worlds. Celestial beings control every one of these spheres and attend the individuals on them. It is indeed vast. The celestial hierarchy in charge of our galaxy is centered at the heart of the Milky Way, in a black hole. Don't they exist on cloud? No clouds, no black hole. Celestial beings are domiciled on material spheres. If celestials control everything, why don't they swoop in 107 trillion? Mark Kimmel and take charge. Frustration showing, Sarah said. I am sorry that you do not grasp the importance of the cosmic paradigm, the changes it will cause, the promise it holds. See esoteric ideas. I didn't see their practical application. Let me try this another way. Can you agree that your astronomers don't have an explanation for how your planet came to? Sarah asked. They have theories, but that's all they are. Theories. Does the Big Bang Theory explain everything, or are even your own scientists beginning to challenge it? How much of the totemis of the universe do these theories account for? Does random evolution or chaos theory explain how DNA was created from basic chemicals? They are theories. They are not perfect. Varaman upon yourself the possibility that there are celestials controlling the Milky Way galaxy, beings that keep things stable, beings that bring life to planets. Open yourself to the possibility that this planet is part of an orchestrated and friendly universe teeming with similarly controlled planets, all supervised by higher, wiser powers. 108 No celestial being can challenge your free choice, Sarah said. It is a cosmic edict. You must care for yourself, and your world. How you do it. I subtoy now. Why are extraterrestrials interested in Earth? Mortals from other planets are interested in the welfare of a sister planet. We worry that this world will destroy itself by misusing powerful technologies such as nuclear or those reverse-engineered from crashed extraterrestrial spaceships. The universe is interconnected. What happens on this planet affects all. Ryan reached for his water bottle and took a long drink. So, you risked your life to bring this information to Earth? After that trip yesterday, I'm pretty open, but I still don't see the practical side of it. The buzzing of an airplane interrupted his words. They watched as it flew into the narrow canyon, circled where the gorge widened, and returned toward the west. Had it zeroed in on their hiding spot? Sarah went to check on Peter. Ryan popped an antacid tablet into his mouth and wandered off toward the rock lip overlooking the canyon. His mind drifted, inspecting the rock face for a possible escape route, thinking about what Sarah had said, worrying about Peter and the im's pursuers. Ordinarily Ryan would have enjoyed a drink. He was convinced it calmed him in situations like this. Besides, he liked the taste of bourbon and water, but he found he had no desire for alcohol. He glanced at his avocet. He was surprised to see the elevation reading at 06720. The mesa's top had slanted down as they came east, plus they had ascended from its top and into the protection of a ravine at the head of a gorge. He peered at the valley's narrow floor, 1,000 feet below, but saw no trail. The upper walls of the canyon were smooth and unbroken. To get down, they would have to negotiate 300 feet of sheer rock face. To the east, where the gorge widened, a small stream appeared out of the shadows before disappearing into the desert beyond the mouth of the canyon. Sunlight, reflecting off its surface, created a silver serpent. Within the valley, patches of green grass and cottonwoods contrasted with the surrounding desert soil. Although the sun was still high, the southern cliffs and the canyon's floor lay in shadows, dim enough that a satellite photo might not disclose a hiking party. Close observation by an Air 109 trillion Mark Kimmel plane was another matter. His boyhood friend was now the campaign manager for the leading presidential contender. At Sam's request, Ryan had agreed to allow senators to be used as the site for a campaign stop. When he returned to work, one of the first things he needed to do was be sure everything was prepared for Carlton Boyle's visit. 110 hawks circled below him, riding the gorge's thermals, hunting breakfast, In ever-decreasing circles the graceful bird closed in on its prey until it swooped a few moments later. It gleamed over Ryan's head, a fuzzy grey ball in its talons. This sparked an old memory. Many years ago, before his father sent Anya away to boarding school, Sam Wellborn and he had trudged through snow in an open field near St. Louis, each at a .22. A fuzzy grey streak leapt from cover. His friend spun and got off a shot before the rabbit disappeared over the hill. They ran up a slope, laughing and shouting, feet churning the white powder. When they popped over the top, the grey streak took off again. Ryan took 2 shots before it toppled over another rise. "Lucky we aren't hunting dinner," Sam had snickered. They had laughed and enjoyed the sunny winter day. Their ice and great and universal wish of mankind expressed in all religions, in all art and philosophy, and in all human life. The wish to pass beyond himself as he now is. Beatrice Hinkle 7. It was almost dusk by the time they slipped to the edge of the cliff. Cody showed Ryan the piton he had hammered into the rock to the left of the water that trickled into the gorge. The Navajo had fed a long rope through a carabiner attached to the piton. Sarah and Ryan carried full packs along with water and snacks. Peter carried a small pack with his personal items. Cody had the fanchon's other things. They left the 2 llamas tethered under the camouflage. The camping gear and emergency supplies remained with them. Sarah told them quietly that the IMS search team was getting close, but the airplane had not spotted them. Their pursuers had fanned out to find possible descents from the top of the mesa. 2 men were following the tracks south, but had not caught up with Teddy and his llama Tit. Cody told them that the first part of the hike would be the Mark Kimmel. Ryan waited impatiently. He expected the ins at any moment. Lowering Peter took almost a half hour. Finally Cody raised the rope and Ryan started his descent. Each grasp of the rock with his right hand was painful. Cody and Sarah fed him rope and he searched for handholds. Ryan heard the llamas twitter. He grabbed at a protruding rock, lost his grip, and sailed into space. He groped for another hold but the face of the cliff had angled away. Unable to cry out, he tried swinging himself, but only banged his sore hand onto rock that was closer than he thought. While the llamas twittered anew, he dangled from a rope attached to a single piton in a rock 75 feet above. He had scrutinized the gorge and noted the smooth face of the cap rock. He suspected that it had been worn smooth by an occasional or burst heart-doomed Twitterivithacity of mesa at this low spot. He had also noted a frightening lack of ledges, or 112 most difficult. It was too steep to see below as the Navajo disappeared over the side. Ryan kept the rope taut enough to ensure that he could arrest a fall before any serious damage occurred. Sarah stepped over and helped Ryan feed the rope. "How is your hand? This isn't going to be fun, but I can do it." He flexed his injured hand. Sarah went next. They attached the upper end of the rope to her belt. Cody controlled her descent from below while Ryan rested his hand. Sarah's cat-like athletic ability showed. She descended as fast as the Navajo fed her rope. Cody raised a knotted end of the rope back to the carabiner and Ryan made a harness for Peter. Ryan helped the bald extraterrestrial scoot to the edge of the cliff. Then he jerked twice on the dangling rope and eased Peter over the edge. Sarah and Cody lowered him. Cracks, a necessary component of rock climbing. Now, as he was experiencing it up close, He wondered why Cordy had chosen to descend in this particular place, and what narrow shelf the others rested on. Cody and Sarah lowered him a few feet. He found a protrusive sign and grabbed on. Like the experienced mountain climber he was, he used the smallest crack or outcropping to secure a hold for a foot or hand. In a few minutes he joined the others and found himself standing beneath a substantial overhang. Wind and water had sculpted a large cave in the face of the mesa. The Anasazi had built dwellings here. Now they were reduced to crumbling adobe bricks. 113 trillion. The Navajo undid the knot from one end of the rope and quietly pulled the dangling length upward. After it passed through the carabiner, it fell to the level with a whoosh and a thud. Darkness enveloped them as they descended the narrow trail. Peter in front with Cordy. Ryan used his right hand for balance and clutched the cliff with the other. Sarah crept ahead, but the rock face often obscured his view of her. Since the trail was hidden by the rock overhand, Cody whispered that they could use their flashlights. This would have been so much easier in broad daylight. On the other hand, their timing had probably saved them from discovery by the INS's airplane. Now the shadows hid them. The trail's surface, worn smooth by the wind, was only 2 feet wide. In places it appeared to have been hand-chiseled from the sandstone. The ancient inhabitants had used it to bring food and water to their cave dwelling. Ryan imagined the drop-off, inches from his right foot. This was as tough as any of Colorado's fatinas. He had not attempted any of those at night. Sarah eased forward. The pale braid looped over her pack. Mark Kimmel. Suddenly he heard sliding and scraping. Then, help. Help. He heard something smash onto the rocks below. He rushed forward, edging around the corner of the cliff, but could see no sign of Sarah or her flashlight. The trail had taken an abrupt drop. He spotted her white braid dangling off the edge of the cliff. "Hurry, I'm slipping," she screamed. Ryan stepped forward, lost his footing on the slippery gravel, and landed on his backpack. Scraping along the rock face, his left hand clawed for a hold. A jagged rock tore into his left thigh and almost bounced him off the ledge. He found a crack, stabbed his fingers into it, and held on. His skidding stopped, not far from Sarah. He braced himself, left foot against the cliff. With his right hand he grabbed her left arm. "Gotcha," he yelled. "Grab my leg." He felt taut muscles straining beneath the skin of her slim arm. An excruciating burn caused his right hand to tremble. Her hand groped for his leg and grabbed on. "Got it," she said and exhaled. He squeezed her arm as tight as his damaged hand would allow. I scoot back. Ryan extended his leg, but his boot slipped and he slid forward on loose sand. Without warning, he was on his back. The entire lower half of his body dangled into empty space. Only his left hand's grip on the rock knob prevented the two of them from falling hundreds of feet into the gorge. 114 was her most visible feature. She had fastened her hat to her belt. He lost sight of her as she scooted around the next bulge in the cliff. Sarah screamed. His clutch on her arm and her grasp on his leg were all that stood between her and the terminal fall. "Oh shit," he muttered. "Hold tight." Adrenaline pumping. He flexed his arm and inched his body back up the narrow trail. He almost passed out from the pain in the hand that held Sarah's arm. Swinging his left leg back onto the trail, he wedged his foot into a narrow crack in the rock face and pushed backward until he felt relatively secure. "That's as far as I can go." Sweat drenched his shirt. You'll have to pull yourself up. Breathing hard, he thanked God for those workouts at the health club. Sarah inched her body up over the edge and with a small cry rolled over his leg and onto the trail. He sensed her whole body heaving and knew she was crying with relief. Her pack had fallen into the canyon. What happened? Cordy's voice floated up to them. He was 100 yards down the trail and did not need to shout. His voice echoed in the quiet of the narrow canyon. Come back, number. Stay there. BL Trillion. He relaxed his clasp on her arm and moved to hold her hand. She grasped it, felt the bandage, and relaxed her grip. He lay back, his foot planted, both hands throbbing. Sarah fell over the side. Ryan said in a low voice, "But she's okay." Sarah held on with both hands. At that moment she did not seem like a wise extraterrestrial messenger, only a frightened woman. Ryan tried to imagine what she must have been feeling, light years from home, trekking across the remote desert of a strange planet, dependent on strangers to keep her safe. And now, an almost fatal fall. When her breathing returned to normal, she relaxed her hold. With his encouragement, she released his leg and reached for the solid rock of the cliff. She turned and sat up with her back against it, but continued to hold his hand. "Mark Kimmel trail wider here," Cody said. Sarah returned his gaze, but then pulled back. He had a distinct impression that he had heard her say, "Thank you," but he was positive her lips had not moved. The voices from above became louder. "I heard them," a throaty voice said. "They went this way." A different man said, "See the piton? Call Morgan. Tell him we need climbing gear and rope. Lots of rope." With his free hand, Ryan brushed loose rocks off the trail and over the side. A pebble waterfall echoed down the gorge. He stood on the narrow trail, gave a gentle tug, and pulled Sarah to her feet. They had no time to recover. After a few deep breaths, she whispered, "I'm okay. Let's go." She scooted sideways along the ledge. Taking a tentative step, she whispered, "I can walk the rest of the way." She released his hand. At that moment a loud voice from the top of the cliff yelled, "This is the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service. You are ordered to stop or we'll shoot." Ryan and Sarah flattened themselves against the rock wall. Powerful flashlights played off the cliff above and below them. 116. "Go ahead. We'll be along in a minute." Ryan swung his legs around and sat up. They perched in darkness. Both flashlights and Sarah's backpack were at the bottom of the gorge. Sarah was about to say something, but Ryan stopped her. Audible over his own heavy breathing, he heard the echo of voices from above. He put his finger to his lips, hoping she would see it and not speak. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. In the dim light, her eyes glistened and he could make out the curve of her mouth. He wanted to kiss her, hold her, and make her feel safe. Remembering that he had not seen the trail when he had looked into the gorge from the top, Ryan turned to Sarah and whispered, "Let me go first." He eased himself around her. "Give yourselves up or we'll shoot." Ryan halted, but the lights shone nowhere near him. He moved ahead. "Last chance. Stop or we'll shoot." Ryan stopped again. He was now fairly sure the men above had no idea where they were, or even how long ago they had departed the camp. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of pistol fire echoed in the canyon. Ryan heard bullets ricochet off the cliff wall, but they were far from his position. The Ins was firing indiscriminately, hoping to scare them into surrendering. He felt a hand on his shoulder and froze. "Keep moving," Sarah said. "They do not know where we are," a new voice from above said in a quieter tone. "Hey, Viejo, cut it out. You have no idea what you're shooting at." A harsh argument echoed down the gorge behind them. In 200 yards, they caught up with the Cordy and Peter, and to everyone's relief the trail became easier. "I hope it takes them a while to get a rope," Ryan said to Cordy. The fugitives stumbled forward in the growing dark. When Ernest Steger returned to his home in Winnetka, Illinois, it was late that night. He was not ready to sleep, so he went to his study and recorded his recollections of the meeting with Leonard Williams and the other candidates. As he wrote in his diary, he recalled his introduction to the media affiliates 45 years earlier. MGM, Universal, Paramount. They are all leaning up. The speaker, James Vigilant, was a well-known producer of the Silver Trillion. Mark Kimmel in the early 1950s. Someone in the group had named them the media affiliates. The name had stuck, although no one used it outside these gatherings. The next speaker had been Seymour Norton, head of New York's most prestigious advertising agency. He reported that the Advertising Association had recently adopted a code of ethics that spoke to truth. He snickered when he pointed out how the revolution in advertising had moved from selling products to selling the Big Seven: happiness, security, acceptance, success, power, comfort, and sex. It was easy to tell the truth about a product when the ad's image contained the real message. The final report had come from a man who did not identify himself. Unlike the others around the table, young Steger did not know his name. The man spoke to the state of the Cold War. His grim assessment included details of Soviet penetration of the United States intelligence community. He said that his organization was Route 118 screen, no Morris or Williams or Ossie and Harriet. Instead of breaking hearts, we're out to capture genitals. We can't shift that fast. Another man from Hollywood, Darian Grayson, said, "There are existing contracts, shootings in the pipeline. Plus we're talking new screenplays. It's going to take time. Marilyn Monroe is going to be very big," Vigilant said. As a newcomer and the youngest in the room, Ernest Steger had watched the assembly of powerful and influential men. At the request of his ailing father, they had allowed him as a substitute. In those days, he was not confined to a wheelchair. Having advanced from his initial job as a reporter, he was the robust and energetic publisher of Cincinnati's major newspaper. His father owned that newspaper and several others, as well as one television and 3 radio stations, ironed them out and using disinformation to cloud their effectiveness. He cautioned the group to watch for books, screenplays and articles by communist sympathizers, and to report them to him. He also gave them a briefing on recent developments within the military and covered communities. After the man excused himself, the meeting turned to coordinating the media affiliate's message to the public. Seymour Norton had summed up the meeting by saying, "We've got them. This is turning out to be better than a drug cartel. It's legal and everyone's buying into it, whether they realize it or not." Remembering these early days, Steger was disturbed by the aging of the media affiliates. It used to be so straightforward: 3 television networks and a handful of Hollywood studios. Now there were more television networks and studios than he could keep track of. Yet, Their carefully constructed consumptionist box had survived the hippies of the 60s, the environmentalists of the 70s and 80s, and the excesses of the 90s. Now they were faced with a new danger: the Internet. Its open access and freedom of discussion threatened to expose the confines of the box. But with large investments in advertising, they were commercializing it. When the value of their stock tumbled, Steiger and two of the other media affiliates had bought major blocks of the shares of companies that specialized in Internet search engines. It was only a matter of time before they would be able to take control. Then they would direct users to their preferred sites in concert with the box. Over the past 10 years, he had watched as many of the media affiliates coasted on their earlier success. Steiger made an order to address the situation with whom he felt close. If they were to reach their ultimate goal, they needed new blood. 119 trillion. Mark Kimmel. They used first names in hasty introductions, and then placed everyone's packs in the trunk of Lobo's car. Lobo produced a basket of oranges and a box of donuts. Sarah grabbed for a piece of fruit and whispered to Ryan, "Oranges are my favorite." "What did you say?" Lobo asked. "I said I love oranges." She glanced at Lobo as she peeled the skin from it. "What about one of these?" Ryan reached for a glazed donut. "No thank you." Sarah scrunched her nose and pulled a granola bar from her pocket. Recalling Sarah's distrust of Lobo, Ryan remembered to touch as few surfaces as possible and wiped his fingerprints from everything he did. He knew his prints were on file from his stint in the military and from certain government contracts with which he had been involved. "May I use your telephone?" Ryan asked. 120 in the morning. Jimmy Lobo's ghost light was a beacon for the fugitives. It drew its power from an electrical line running into his property. Like many Navajos, Lobo burned it to ward off evil spirits. His dirty white mobile home stood next to a windmill and water tank. A 6-foot TV dish glistened in the moonlight. Lobo's place stood at the mouth of the canyon. An older model Ford was parked near the front door. Ryan, Sarah, Peter, and Cordy hurried on the transportation for the next leg of their efforts to slip away from the inns. Out in front, Cody yelled, "Lobo, we're here." As the fugitives trudged to the mobile home, its owner came out onto its rickety stoop. He greeted Cordy as an old friend and ushered the four inside. A short, muscular man, about 40, Jimmy Lobo wore a western shirt and black jeans. His feet were bare. From a sullen, weathered face, dark eyes examined length held no traditional braid his guests. His shoulder, no phone. Lobo gestured to his trailer. Ryan slipped into the bathroom to wash up with soap and water. He was examining his hand. It had broken open and was oozing fluid. A knock interrupted him. "Hurry," Sarah whispered. "The inn's got ropes and are coming down the canyon." Ryan turned off the faucet and wiped off his fingerprints. When he came out, still carrying the hand towel, Sarah was waiting. "Peter is in the car. Cody has told Lobo nothing except that we are ready to leave." Then Navajo guide waved goodbye through the cloud of dust. Lobo's Crown Victoria kicked up. The older vehicle fish-tailed in the soft roadbed. Unlike the road near Bensdig, this one had been recently graded. After 5 miles, they came to a paved road and turned left. "Do you know where to drop me?" Ryan asked, checking to see if the security had held. Shipwreck. Lobo responded, jaw clenched. Do you know where equals no? At the Taco Bell. A moment of hesitation then. Okay, how long will it take? Ryan asked. 21 trillion. Ryan smelled liquor, but Lobo appeared to be steady enough to drive, with the inns right behind them. Ryan decided not to argue about it, as long as the Navajo got them where they wanted to go. Every few minutes, Lobo wiped his hands on his pants, adjusted his hat, or looked in the rear-view mirror. There were no other vehicles on the road as the first gray of dawn lightened the sky. 2 hours, the Navajo belched and a foul smell filled the front of the car. Mark Kimmel half asleep. Ryan's mind began to contemplate a vision of his world as part of the organized cosmos. He began to see the possibilities as people's priorities changed. If they adopted the cosmic paradigm, they'd reject truth as dictated by Madison Avenue and Hollywood. Shopping would probably diminish and people would construct a completely new set of priorities. As if on automatic, his mind began to seek out the commercial possibilities in this new makeup. A worldwide economic restructuring, reorientation of the stock market, new approaches to the environment, marketing based on truth. Unable to keep his eyes open, Ryan dozed off. He did not see the 2 light green sedans that passed them going the other way. Ryan awoke as Lobo slowed to turn onto US 64. Bright sun against the windshield. 7:42 a.m. Elevation 5310. Teknos Post Trading POST. Established 1905. Cornfields, cottonwoods, and a collection of small houses. With some difficulty, Lobo's car climbed the steep hill to the southeast. Puffy cumulus clouds obscured sunrise. From the south side of the highway, the steep slopes of the Carrizo Mountains, dark elevations contracted with the Dan Desert. On the left, another mesa, and, on the northeast, LZ2 the Navajo drove at 45 mph, staying well towards the right shoulder. They gradually climbed out of the valley, desert on both sides of the road. In place of trees, power lines and telephone poles. Along the highway, fence poles had been embedded in the soft rock and strands of barbed wire ran between them. At the foot of a downgrade, there was an unexpected lush meadow with several houses. A huge chunk of ruddy sandstone with vertical sides seemed to have lifted by some giant hand and dropped on the flat plain next to one farmhouse. Horizontal mountains. If everything worked according to Toplin, he'd be home by this evening. Tomorrow he'd be back in the office preparing for his meeting with Nick and his father. When they crested a hill, the tip of Shipwreck emerged in the east. The core of an extinct volcano, the mountain thrust itself 1,700 feet above the flat surrounding plains. Settlers used it as a distinctive landmark. 15 miles north lay the town with the same name. Sabital was sacred to the Navajos. Climbing was forbidden. Near the road, junipers dotted the landscape, twisted and stunted. Blue-gray berries, sparse sagebrush, grass, and rocks. An occasional doubler-wide hulks of autos, discarded wood, and abandoned appliances surrounded each home. Welcome to New Mexico. Shipwreck 19. The full height of Shipwreck became visible. Lobo became more agitated. He glanced in the mirror, studying the faces of the Fanchons. He looked sideways at Ryan, but did not speak. In the distance, the Four Corners power plant spewed out a dirty cloud. I hung in the air, obscuring the eastern horizon. The mammoth coal-fired plant supplied electricity to several states. A consortium had built it in the reservation to take advantage of loose environmental standards. Sanitas's monitoring system regularly rated it as a top air pollution source. They emerged on top of the mesa. Cows grazing. A bright blue house. No clutter. Ryan checked the mirror on his side. No vehicles in sight. Mile marker 18. Shipwreck. The town lay in the valley before them. The San Juan River, its headwaters in the high mountains, made a gradual turn here, on its way to join Colorado and Utah. Further north it was a famous drought stream theoretically to the outskirts of shipwreck Operation DWI checkpoint. Lobo's breath smelled of alcohol. Dinner call 123 trillion. Mark Kimmel turned around. Ryan shouted, "Go back to that shopping center." The Navajo turned his head and muttered something. Ryan grabbed the steering wheel and yanked this direction. The car headed for the bridge's right side. Lobo hit Ryan's bandaged hand and wrestled the wheel the other direction. The vehicle careened across the left eastbound lane, scraping the concrete center divider. Ryan grabbed the wheel again and yanked harder, bracing his foot against the center console. From his position in the passenger seat, Ryan wrenched control of the wheel from Lobo and, hand over hand, twisted it this way as far as it would go. The pain in his hand was excruciating, but he held on. They exited the bridge. The car spun to the right, and with tires squealing bounced over the curb. It missed a pedestrian by a few feet. Shocked by the near casualty, Ryan almost released his hold on the wheel. They careened down the embankment, toward the river. Welcome to Nizhoni Park. The car missed the sign 120 Falege. Shipwreck Campus. Speed limit 35. At Sebitati Shopping Center. Taco Bell. The sign was on the right. Lobo drove past it and took a left at the intersection with US 666. "Where are you going?" Ryan asked, pointing behind the car. He said, "There's the Taco Bell. I jet out here." From the back seat Sarah placed a tense hand on his shoulder. Lobo drove on, heading across the bridge over the San Juan River. They were on the newer eastbound side. 2 lanes between concrete barriers. The westbound was older, steel trestle construction. "I fear we are headed for trouble," Sarah said, clutching his shoulder. By inches, Lobo worked the brake, but could not halt their skid. At one point the car threatened to tip over, but a large rock on the left banged it upright. Ryan still gripped the wheel when the car smashed into a tree, 20 feet down the slope. His seat belt dug into his chest, but saved him from crashing through the windshield. A stunned Lobo, blood on his mouth, opened his door and stumbled away. Ryan did not try to stop him. An unoccupied picnic table stood 10 feet to their right. The New Mexico way station was 100 yards east. Big rigs, facing the other direction. The stunned pedestrian, on the sidewalk 20 feet above, stood staring at the wreck. After he caught his breath, Ryan released his grip on the wheel and turned to the rear. Everybody okay? Breathless and pale, the 2 falchions signaled they had been thrown against the front seat, but were all right except for bruises. "Let's get the hell out of here." Ryan's heart pounded. Lobo's gone for help. It wouldn't be the kind we want. The key hung in the ignition. Ryan climbed into the driver's seat and twisted it. No response. He jimmied the shift lever and tried again. Nothing. Damn, leave the stuff in the trunk. We'll get it later, he said. Lugging backpacks would slow them down and attract attention. No, Peter insisted. We must have our things, Sarah cried. Momentarily uncertain, Ryan hesitated and then said, "I'll get my Jeep. Be right back." Ryan ran up the hill. He passed the pedestrian they had nearly hit and muttered, "Sorry." He took off across the bridge and, not waiting for a break in traffic, hoofed it across the busy highway to the Taco Bell. In the parking lot, he began searching for his Jeep. Ryan flashed back to the desperate struggle with the 125 trillion. Mark Kimmel. He walked around it to make sure it was his and banged his right hand and half fender. Damn, that hurt. The last thing he wanted was somebody's car alarm going off. With miles of open space to work with, why did they make these parking slots so close together? There. A senator's parking decal was in the rear window. His spare key opened the door. The interior was as dusty as he had left it. Ben had repacked the rear with his camping equipment and espresso machine. He hurriedly read a note on the front seat. "Inns gave me a hard time, but I didn't tell them anything. Your keys are in the glove box. Taking artifacts for analysis. Good luck." Then the Jeep started on command. He eased out of the space 126 steering wheel. Lobo had planned to hand them over to the authorities for the reward. Little Caesar Pizza, City Market, General Store. He headed left, trying to act nonchalant while his heart pounded. His shirt soaked through with sweat. Where was the damn Jeep? He scrutinized the rows of dusty metal and faded colors. Tall trucks and vans blocked his view. White Jeep. With adrenaline pumping, Ryan slowed himself to a walk and scanned the parking lot. White Jeep. Why were there so many vehicles in this? Let Sunday was a day of rest, a day to go to church. He trotted down an aisle toward the storefronts. That guy 3 cars down, was he watching? There, 2 rows over, next to a white Dodge Ram, stood a dusty white Jeep. He scooted between 2 cars and bumped his hand in our side mirror while fumbling for his spare key. Turned right at the storefronts, and caught the light as it and read a sign in Therite. Farmington 29 Gallup 93. No indication of Torado, Colorado. Unleaded 135.9. He glanced at the dash. The tank was full. He raced the Jeep across the bridge and turned into the picnic area. In a minute or two they had their things stuffed into the Jeep's rear compartment. Ryan took an extra moment to wipe fingerprints off the dash, steering wheel, ignition key, door handles, and truck lid of Lobo's car. No use making it easy for them to trace him. "Where's your car?" Ryan asked. Sarah pointed east, the direction Lobo had fled. "Too dangerous. Need to get away. We'll come back." She looked at Peter and said, "All right." They exited the picnic area. No left turn. A center divider blocked them from going west. Heavy traffic. He looked east. US 666 North. Cortez. The signs were at the intersection, a half block away. Colorado. Ryan darted out into oncoming traffic and into the left lane. Turning at the corner, they headed up the hill, away from the center of shipwreck. On the right, Navajo Police Department, Division of Law Enforcement. Was Lobo headed there? He slowed for a dog dodging traffic. Shipwreck Post office. Cars pulled out in front of them. 4 corners adolescent treatment center. The edge of town. Speed limit 55. Along with other traffic. He was already doing 65. We need the supplies in our car, Sarah said. Our clothes, Peter said. And we need to get out of here, right now. We'll get them, I promise. Why $1.8 trillion?